He keeps saying property taxes, everybody. What is it?
All right, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us. I think we're about ready to get started with the traffic calming part of the program. You may have noticed that I just hit record, so just know that this is being recorded. I would ask, because this is in such a big room, if you would put any comments or questions in the chat. Just hit the little chat feature there and type those. We do have someone who is monitoring that and get you an answer that way. Again, appreciate you joining us tonight. We'll get started here in just a second.
And with that, someone in our community asked for money for slowing down Brook. So Jeff Hammond, let me introduce. He's going to talk about that.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm going to do my best. I'll talk as loud as I can. Just know I'm probably blowing out people on the end of the line. We have a lot of your neighbors who are at home and who are participating with us virtually, and so they're able to see the slides on their computer at home. We are recording this. So in a couple of days, you'll be able to go on NDOT's website and pull this down. I know you can't see. I'm going to assume you can't see our slides up here, but just know that you have an opportunity to access those at your leisure here in a couple of days. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a consultant working for NDOT. That's the Nashville Department of Transportation. And we're talking about a project that we do a lot of, but this one's in a little bit of a different vein. As Councilman Druffel mentioned, this is what we call participatory budgeting, which means it did not go through the normal processes that most of our traffic calming projects go through. That introduces a couple of wrinkles that we'll talk about at the end, but for now, we are working with the department to design a traffic calming project. We think that tries to meet the objectives of what that participatory budget committee had in mind when they talked about slowing down traffic on Brook Hollow. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides just about that process, and ultimately we'll get to a very preliminary concept for what we have in mind for traffic calming on the street. We're here tonight, though, to get that feedback, and I know with a crowd this big in a room this size, that may be difficult. I'm going to show you some contact information and would invite you and encourage you to give us that feedback in the days ahead. We're not rushing this. This will not be done, something that will be done in the next couple of weeks. You got time. We want to be sure we're getting this information out to you. Participatory budgeting is a process that began a couple of years ago. In this case, there's a interactive map online that will show you all of these projects all across Davidson County, and this one for this district is traffic calming on Brook Hollow Road. This did come from a request or an application through that program, and so that committee then talked about it. I think it went to a whole countywide vote in essence, and people said, I think this project would be a good one, and that's how it showed up as getting funding. The funding is in place. We do have that. So it's not a question of, support at this point. It's now about how do we make this into a good project and what the street would like to see. Just some information about how that process flows. But in terms of the specifics, what we know when this project came from that committee to NDOT, what we were told was the desire was to add, I'm reading here from that map and those materials, add traffic calming measures on Brook Hollow Road between Charlotte Pike and Highway 70 South to slow traffic and improve safety. That's the objective of generally all of our traffic calming projects. It also said Brook Hollow Road has varying lane width from 10 to 12 feet. And one of the recommendations was add edge line markings and make it a consistent 10-foot wide width to make it visually look narrower and help slow traffic. So the idea there is if you put white edge lines, you already have the double solid yellow line, add white edge lines to try to visually make it narrower was one idea there. Another tool, I know you can't see this, that is available online on the NDOT website is an interactive map. This is a screenshot of that map just showing you those limits. So we are looking at the entire length of Brook Hollow from Charlotte down to Harding. And I'll cover a couple of the tools that we have in our toolbox when it comes to traffic calming. Most of you are very familiar. Some of you may say we're too familiar with the first one, which is speed cushions. This has really become the bread and butter of the traffic calming program. Sure. Yeah, I was just trying to stay close to the button. Sorry. Speed cushions have really become the bread and butter of this program for a couple of reasons. One, they're very consistent. This is the go-to countermeasure that we are using on just about every street and metro when they have applied for traffic calming. You've probably all driven over these. It's a recycled rubber product that bolts down. So we like it because it's fast. It's low impact when it comes to installation of these. It's dependable. They're holding up well. We use the same manufacturer. It's the same product we're putting on every street that we do. You see some different configurations maybe. Sometimes you'll see them 2 side by side, sometimes 3, sometimes more. The idea is, and we were having a discussion up front earlier, the idea is that we have to make sure we go all the way from edge to edge, not literally to the edge, but that we cover the entire width of the road, because we know that people will drive around these if they feel like they can. If it feels like it saves them any time at all. These are about 3 inches tall, which is not very tall. Most people say that's tall enough because they really do a good job at slowing traffic down. They're 6 feet wide, so there's essentially no car that can straddle these. You can get close, and a larger truck can get close to straddling, but the idea is things like fire trucks, ambulances, those big emergency vehicles with a wider wheelbase can get a little closer and be less impacted. That's why they come in this configuration like this. We can also vary the length of them. Our standard is a 10.5-foot long speed cushion. That's what you see in most places, but we do have the ability to get a longer one. That gives us a more gradual ramp up and down, and generally is a little more comfortable. The shorter, we go to a 7-foot. We really reserve those in some of our most urban areas of Nashville. It's a much more aggressive slowing of traffic. So for an area like this, we'd be looking at the 10.5 and maybe the 14-foot long one. I think that's about it as far as that goes. We do have some before and after data. I won't go through that. One of the other tools that we do have is a radar feedback sign. You're familiar with these. There's already a couple of them on Brook Hollow. Some people swear by them and say they're the greatest thing in the world. Some people say they're useless, and we've all gotten used to it, and it doesn't affect us anymore. So there's some before and after data there too. Early on, the results are good, and we're seeing decreases in traffic, but we're still kind of looking at that long-term data to see how effective these are in the long term. We often will use these, though, where we can't use something like a speed cushion. Hills, that's the reason why you've got a couple now, I think, where you've got them. They're on hills here. This is a pretty hilly road, as you know. Sharp curves, if there's too many driveways. There are some reasons why we can't always use speed cushions the way we'd like to, and we might substitute for a sign like that. This is one that we just mentioned, and I think it's a pretty good idea. Narrowing, we know that the wider the street looks, sometimes that will encourage higher speeds. You all in this neighborhood have nice big setbacks, big lots, and so it just sort of feels like there's a lot of room there. Trees help. If there's a lot of trees up next to the road, that tends to slow traffic down, make it look not quite so wide. But another thing that we can do is add those edge lines, and again, effectively visually narrow the width of the lane. The lanes right now are more like 12 feet. I know it said 10 to 12 feet. It's on the upper end of that. And so when we narrow those, if we decide to do that, we would be looking at probably a 10-foot wide lane. That's more of what's becoming more of a standard, especially in more urban areas. You could do 11. You could leave it like it is now and just stripe it right on the edge. But those are some options that we have as well. I'm just hitting that one right there. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Bulb outs and chicanes is another form of pavement marking. these show up more in urban areas, although we can do them in suburban areas like this as well, especially where you've got some intersections here. The one right out here at Westmead is a good example. They're pretty large sweeping radius turns. Just back when they were constructed, that's how they were doing them, and that can encourage some higher speeds. Of course, a lot of your intersections are always stopped, so it's not as important there. But to tighten that up, to slow those speeds down around those curves, it's a tool we use. We'll often do it in urban areas because it's really helpful for pedestrians. And I know you have some walking that happens in the neighborhood, but not as much as you might have in more urban areas. But that can effectively, when we put those bulb outs in, that can effectively shrink the width that a pedestrian needs to cross the street. So that can be a helpful thing. Chicanes are even a more different one. We only have a couple of instances like this in Davidson County. It's sort of an artificial meandering of the street. Works well if you have some parking on both sides. I think in Belmead they have one where actually it goes down to one lane and you have to yield to the oncoming car. That's another form of chicanes, but probably not something we're looking at on this street. Okay. Will it go full? There it goes. Traffic circles. This is the last one. We keep it in the toolbox. We don't do them as often. There are some cases. Again, I know there's some of these in Belmead on some different streets. But it can be an effective solution, especially if we're at an intersection of two streets that are trying to be traffic calmed. They have some unintended consequences, as we have learned, especially large vehicles like school buses kind of have a time. So you need a really big amount of pavement at intersections for these to work and it be understood how you drive around it and so forth. That's why there's been a little bit of a pullback in recent years from NDOT on installing more traffic circles, just because of some of those things and some of that feedback that we've gotten from neighborhoods where these have gone in. All right, so I think next we have, and again, I know you can't see this, a couple of images showing you some concepts. And what we have done for this street that we would like your feedback on is propose a very standard type of a traffic calming project that we would do on most streets, and that is a speed cushion based project. When you can look at this, you'll see a series of speed cushions. I think from one end to the other, which I want to say, I didn't put this on here, I think it's about 3 miles. This is a long project for us. We don't typically do projects this long. We have proposed about 10 locations along that 3 miles. So it's not nearly as many as we would do on most streets. And the reason why, typically what we like to do is take the length of that, get an average spacing of what we know works well. It's usually in the order of 400 to 600 feet, and kind of systematically put these in. In this case, because of those hills, and the hills, if you're at home or can see that, are shaded in yellow to kind of tell us as we design this that some of those places are sort of off limits. So you know, if you all, any of you live on Brook Hollow and you're on the side of a hill, we're probably not going to put one right in front of your house. We have some design thresholds that won't allow us to do that. And so just looking at those gaps in between those hills primarily, and stop signs too, we don't get nearly as many opportunities. So that may be welcome news to you. It may not be, but I think in this case, we'd be looking at a much lesser installation in terms of the number of speed cushions than we've done in some of our projects in the past. We still think it'll give us a good result. If the objective is to slow traffic down along the length of the road, that in combination with the always stops that are already there. It's not very exciting beyond that. I've got 3 different slides. We broke it up. Councilman, you can forward through. Most people cannot see any of these, but if you want to talk later or again, pull this up at home in a few days, you'll be able to see in general where we think a good spot for these cushions would be. You'll see the level, maybe you can tell the level of detail. It's not very detailed, and that's where we are at this point. That's a concept, and so what would happen after this is, as we continue to talk through this and it kind of focus in on it, we would come back and we would provide a lot more detail about where these speed cushions would go. I think it's a good.
Now, Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, we can have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of questions.
Put a link, that slideshow on the water on the everybody has a chance to look at it.
Just send it to me.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
What I'll do is, actually, I'm gonna ask Jeff to send it to me. I'll kick it out and all the other, so. Yeah. So the question is, the difference between speed bumps, is that right? Yeah, I think, go ahead, Jeff. The question is, was there a difference between speed bumps?
Yes, ma'am, there is. And that's why we go through that. It's important that's an important distinction, very important distinction. We're not talking about the speed bumps that are in Kroger or in Home Depot, okay? That's a speed bump. That's what we call that, a speed bump. We call these speed cushions. The difference is they're about the same height, but ours, instead of being over the length of a foot when you drive over it, we're at least 7 feet, generally 10 and a half, and we can go up to 14. So it is a much more gradual up and back down and doesn't jolt as much as a speed bump. The idea, though, is the same, that when a car encounters this, you have to slow down or it's going to be uncomfortable. That's why it works the way it does.
Okay, just a minute.
When I know that they are there. On August 1st, when they did Vaughn's Gap between 100 and 70, I came down that not knowing they were there, and it's a 2-lane road. The cars behind me, I cannot get off. I now have 2 the challenges caused a problem in the seat area right where your spine serves. I am in pain. Therapy, and I would just urge you to bring this back to NDOT to please put speed bumps and speed cushion signs on the corners of every street where they are. So those of us who physically can suffer from going over them know to avoid them, because there aren't. I've seen 1 speed cushion sign, Elgin Avenue, Building Park. Couple of speed bump signs, but they're right before you can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
All over them.
Yeah.
Each needs to have each corner. And please, when you're doing this project, not to put those of us who can't go over the speed bump.
Yeah, just
okay. Let me address that because it was an important question about signage there.
That's the question first.
Yeah, the question is about there's a health concern here, but also if you can at least know that speed cushion is coming with some signage, then that would be a helpful thing. I think from a technical standpoint, that's something that we can work with. I think when the Vaughn's Gap project went in, I think there is more signage. I don't know where it stands today. Signage on every bump now. That's how it should go in. Sometimes these are getting ahead of themselves. They'll install the cushions and not the signs, or the signs and not the cushions. Almost in every case, we're designing these that there is a sign at every speed cushion. In some neighborhoods, they'll say that's too many signs, we don't want it, and we'll take that into consideration. But generally, the policy is if there's a street intersection in between cushions, we want any traffic that's entering the street for the first time to see that, know that cushion is coming, and yes, we do sign those. So.
Okay, we're going to try to take, go ahead, I see that you're the first. Regarding the whole project, how do you determine that Brook needed these speeds? If you have any statistics, tell me what is the dramatic increase in history of Brook. I don't think that there's ever been any speed-related injuries or deaths on the problem. So the question is, how did Brook get this?
It's a very good question, and it's why at the very beginning we talked about this goes through a little bit of a different procedure. This did not come through our standard traffic calming program. And I say that because typically we do have more data. I don't have speed data and I don't have that crash data and things like that because this was requested through that committee. It's something we can look into. But for us, the amount of speeding does not impact, you know, our ability to do a project from a technical standpoint. It might determine whether it's a good idea or not. But for us, when this is handed and said, design us a traffic calming project, that's what we do. So we do know how many cars are on the street. I think I had that in one of the things. There's nothing here that technically influences how we would design a traffic calming program, but it's a good point. We don't have the data to do it. Now, I will say, as opposed to a typical project, which are prioritized by the amount of traffic, the speed of the traffic, has there been an instance of a fatality, and then some other multimodal considerations. We don't have that here.
Speed cushions are going to slow traffic down, but it's not going to reduce the grid traffic through Westfield. That means other people are going to choose alternate routes through them, and therefore you're going to add more grid traffic on places besides the park. Yeah. Does that mean that you're going to add cushions all through Westfield? That's the solution, because certainly without, I don't understand the need for punishing law-abiding citizens to spend their time not speaking. And the solution is different. It's not doesn't help the people who are obeying the law.
And just to repeat what Jeff has talked about, he nor I, none of us were the ones that asked for this. So just so you know, it was. Well, it was a participatory budget. I don't even know. It was a committee, as far as it was a group of committee that were determined by the mayor's office. I think I don't really know who they were. Okay, just one at a time. You go ahead.
Sir, by your own criteria.
Okay, just a minute.
By your own criteria, and I quote, traffic calming is generally applicable on local residential streets with lower traffic volume, although speeding may be a problem on larger collector and arterial streets. These streets are designed to function differently and may not be applicable for certain treatments. Is this not a major thoroughfare between two U.S. highways? Does it meet these criteria or doesn't it?
Yeah, the question is about the criteria that we use in our typical traffic calming projects. In this case, we would do projects like this. This is classified by the planning department as a collector. So there's essentially three levels of street. There's a local street, there's a collector, and then there's an arterial. And I think y'all know the difference. So the collector does have a moderate traffic volume. It's meant to get you places. It's meant to connect those arterials together. In this, we do traffic calming like this on collector identified streets. This street has about, we had it up there, I think it's 2,500 cars a day. That's moderate range for streets that we otherwise do traffic calming on. So yes, we don't have any, again, we don't have a technical issue with doing it on these. It is a busier street in terms of, it being a collector, but from a traffic volume standpoint, it's kind of in the middle of the types of projects we normally do. We will do this type of traffic calming on streets up to 5,000 cars a day. This one's about half of that. So just for what it's worth.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Can it stop?
Can it be stopped or changed? I don't know. Jeff,
I think what I would do is I'll take that feedback back to the department and say, okay, we have some opinion here that it may not be a good project. Maybe there's more data we want to look at and reconsider that. I think that's the best that I can do is go back and let's talk about it. And just so you know, that's why we're here, to collect this feedback. So no, it's not. I would not say it's a done deal. But keep in mind, there may be aspects that you like. if you like the idea to put the fog lines, we used to call them fog lines, the white lines on the edge of the load and narrow those, I mean, that's a traffic calming program, and that's really all it specifically called out for. So that's an option too. Just keep that in mind, and let's be creative as we think about this.
I live on the corner of Brook Hollow and Johnson Hollow. Stop sign running is atrocious. It's awful. So if that's not part of your program right now, it has to be some way, shape, or form, whether you're putting your phone in the center, you're putting white lines in, you're putting stop signs, cameras, a location for a police officer. I'll actually pat myself in my front yard so somebody can sit there. My cameras run on my driveway, and I get to see it all. I mean, all day. 11 o'clock at night, you burn out with the actual.
Well, okay.
Stop sign safety is the other thing. And the intersection at Johnson Hollow and Brook Hollow is extremely bad. From an expansion of your efforts, I would actually go either way on that as well. So east, west, or south in that particular piece. So I would add that to your assessment. And I think the other thing from a data point perspective is, what are the top speeds you're seeing? Okay? And then how often are people actually running stop signs all the way up and down? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, because I think that actually is a bigger safety issue that you see actually, not just from a speeding perspective.
Well, let me make a suggestion. I'm going to get something out, something like, what would you be acceptable? I get some things from Jeff. And what, would the white line work? What would be acceptable? Most traffic calming is the arrow. Let's take a look at what could work that adds value. Like, one of those signs that tells you that you're going too fast. That works for about a year, then it goes away, right? So let me suggest that we'll get something out, and then I would just like to get your feedback on what you think could help or work. Is that fair?
And I did put my email address up here. I know most of you can't see it. When we get this presentation, you'll have it, but it's Jeff
Think about 3 or 4 more questions. Okay. Right. Well, it depends on what project we determine, but I'm suggesting to you, let's take the things that we might all find acceptable, because I think there are things, if you take a look at, we're probably going to do a traffic circle, but those actually work. Like Laura Breslin was recommended a traffic circle, and they elected not to. So let's take a look at what might work. I'll get this out to you in some fashion, and you get me back your opinion. Well, some kind of system that allows you to do that. Okay, just let's finish a few more questions. Okay. But I'm suggesting not to use traffic bumps, but let's look at options. Right. But did you hear what I said? If we're going to look at options, doesn't mean necessarily they would be bumps. So let's look at options that we think are acceptable. That.
No, I know you.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, we're having decisions about what's best.
I think that's why we're having a discussion now. I hope you're hearing me, is what I'm saying is I'm going to take back what options might be, get them out to you in fashion. I can do it in different ways, through my newsletter, but also through some of the social media. I'll hear back what you think are acceptable options. I'll talk to Jeff about it, and then I'll take it back and say, here's what we think could work without being so, so wrong to our neighborhood. And then I'll get it back to you, and I'll hear from you guys. So it'll be a vote in its own way. I'm anxious to hear more of what we could do, maybe things that aren't going to hurt, like your back and stuff like that. I understand what you're saying. That's why we're here. Okay. Okay, we're going to take like I just said earlier, we're going to try to figure out a way to get this information out, what might be acceptable items, right? What if we took the white line, for example, just narrow the road? Take the things that we think will be less intrusive to our neighborhood, and I'm going to get your information back. I'll accumulate that information and send back out to you and say, hey, I got one of these solar things that here's itself where it tells you your speed limit. None of us probably will have a concern about that. It slows some of the GO traffic out, but some of the things that could work. So I'm going to get this out to you, hear back from you, give that information when I hear back from you over a month, let's say, and then before anything ever starts, talk to Jeff about what options there are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we're going to slow this down and wait. So recognize it's going to take a little time. This will take time, but I just want you to know, we got to do it right, and we got to do it where our neighborhood gets. So the question is how much is those speed cushions?
Depending on the configuration, how many we have to use and the length and all that, each location, I've specified 10, but it sounds like that's going away. Each location would be about $3,000 to $5,000.
Okay.
That's an installed
This young lady's been waiting for a long time, and then we'll go back over here.
Okay, my question is just about the speed. My question is about the speed cushions. You were very careful, I think, with your word choice, that you said ambulances aren't slowed down as much.
Right.
When you give us the information that you're going to share with us, will you include how much longer it would take to have an ambulance arrive at somebody who has a problem, or a fire truck, if the speed cushions were an option? Can you put that information?
The fire trucks. But
Yes, please.
fire truck always goes through them anyhow.
But you were very careful. You said an ambulance wasn't affected as much.
Well, they have different vehicles, so that's one
But
thing.
they are affected, yes?
They can be. A smaller one could be. A bigger one could be. The way we deal with the police and the emergency responders is we have met with them, and so we meet with the fire chief. He knows this program. They're supporters of this program. They see the offsetting benefit of safer streets. They're not concerned about it. If they're not concerned about it, I'm not concerned about it.
And
All of OEM.
The more I think about it, what I'm going to do is get all this information and have another meeting. That way, present it, how's that? And that way, come back, respond to what we think, because this is probably one of the first times I started to see this. It's not Jeff. This is Jeff who's been given this. So just recognize we're trying to get that. Here, then I'll go back to.
Real quick, obviously, we're hearing people don't want these, but let's compare apples to apples. There's speed bumps, like on Bit Bond Gas. You cannot go near the speed limit if you have a neck problem or anything like that. Forget it. I almost got rear-ended trying to slow down and going like that. If you drive out towards Radnor Lake, they have long, you can go speed limit, you can go speed limit, you can have a nice drive. It's not like you got to slow and go like this and someone's behind the phone. Let's compare, when we talk about this, apples to apples. And those would be the only ones that, like, out towards Radnor Lake.
Okay.
To me, that would be acceptable, but I don't want to.
Okay, so what we're going to do, is one more question, then we're going to go on, because we're going to vet this out a little bit more. Okay, so to repeat, what we're going to do is take some of the ideas I'm going to get from Jeff, put them out there where you, and maybe what the impact of that particular thing is, right? If it's a speed hump, or if it's a sign, or it's white line, something that gives you scientific data that says the impact. I'm gonna get that information. I'm gonna bring everybody back within the next 4 to 6 weeks, let's say. And then we can sit down and I can get your response from that. That way we can all look at it and go, okay, those 3 things we find acceptable, they work, and we'll take it from there. That way we'll come up with better plans and bring that back to you and then get your response. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Good job.
So, next week, and I want to do what's best. I go down with all so I feel your pain, maybe not your pain, Lori, and everybody else, but I feel the pain of what this could do to us. But we also, I would have to say, sometimes go a little faster than I'd like to around. So as people walk down these streets, I do see that there's a problem and the story. So that's the flow over this point. Good. Okay. We're going to move on. Okay. Right. Okay. So we talked.
All right. Thank you again for joining. I think that's going to conclude the traffic calming part of the meeting. If you're still there, appreciate you hanging with us. I apologize. I know some of that was probably difficult to hear. To summarize the discussion here in the room, there was a lot of concern about the proposed speed cushions. And so what was committed to is we will go back and we'll develop essentially a signing and marking plan, something without some of that vertical countermeasure, and bring that back to Councilman Druffel. I think he's committed to a second follow-up meeting where we will reconvene and go through some of those ideas. Again, this meeting is being recorded. It should be available here in the next couple of days, and appreciate very much your time and effort to join us here tonight. With that, we'll wish you a very good evening. Thanks again. Good night.